Why is it so important to renew and strengthen the rent laws? I mean, why is that a housing justice issue?
Well, we know that with 2.5 million New Yorkers depending upon rent regulations, without rent stabilization, without rent control, we would have no middle class in New York. Who could afford to pay whatever the landlord can charge them?
Not many people.
And the point is that we have to see how housing is a necessity. Luxury housing is a luxury, but housing is a necessity. And as we were discussing, you can't be fully human without a place to live. So as long as there's a housing shortage, as a society, we have to do what we can to see to it that people have an affordable place to live. Mm-hmm. And rent regulations, at least to some degree, guarantee that. We know that, as you know better than probably anyone, rent regulations have been getting weaker through the years, and currently the major issue that we're concerned about is something that we're calling vacancy destabilization, under which when an apartment reaches $2,000 a month legal rent and is at the same time vacant, the landlord has no obligation to continue to offer a lease at any level. He can offer
just
whatever the traffic.
It's removed from the system.
Yeah,
and so becomes market rate.
Exactly, and then there are various ways within legal, but I would say immoral elements in the rent laws where he can find a way to raise those rents. Mm-hmm. Through MCI, major capital improvements, or other ways of improving the apartment and
people don't realize that a landlord can actually get, if the apartment is vacant and the rent's, like say $1,000 a month or $800 a month, the landlord can actually, through using a combination of vacancy increases and individual apartment increases, can get the rent up to $2,000 and then re-rent the apartment to a new tenant who moves in and has no protections. Yeah. And there's no limit on how much the rent can go up or how often, and there's not even a right to an automatic lease renewal. So people do not understand that it's not just a question of an apartment reaching $2,000 and then becoming vacant. Right. But it can happen while it's vacant, and of course the other thing that happens is that many landlords don't spend the money. Mm-hmm. They just pretend that the apartment is deregulated, and because there is no enforcement, they get away with it.
Yeah. And we estimate that we've been losing at the rate of around 10,000 apartments a year over the last 10 years.
At least 10,000
probably more than that. And so we're now down to 1 million rent-regulated apartments in the city. And how many did we have when rent regulation was established?
Well, in 1970, just to give you a frame of reference, there were 1.1 million rent-stabilized apartments in New York City, and there were 1.1 million rent-controlled apartments, mm-hmm. and 400,000 rent-stabilized apartments. Mm-hmm. That was 40 years ago. Now there are about 35,000, we calculate, rent-controlled apartments, mm-hmm. down from 1.1 million, and roughly 1 million rent-stabilized apartments. So just from that alone, you would see that we have, the size of the regulated universe has been cut by 1/3.
By 1/3.
So that means there's less affordable housing available, yeah. And the squeeze gets harder.
Yeah. So the question is, obviously we do whatever we can. We try to give moral voice to this issue, because this is not just an economic issue, it's not just a political issue, it's a moral issue. And I always wonder, how can someone own property and squeeze every bit of profit out of that property, even at the expense of people's lives? I really think I think we should define that level of greed as a mental illness. I just think, how can someone be so insensitive? I don't know. People are built differently than I am, and that most of us are. I think you could be so greedy that your extra house or your extra vacation or your extra plane results in people being squeezed out of the home and having to live in a shelter. I guess people can justify it by saying, well, I don't know how they justify it, but it's amazing to me that this is even acceptable morally in our society. It's really frightening that we allow this to exist.
Yeah, I mean that we allow, children to be homeless and to have to live in shelters. I mean, what kind of society is that? Yeah. It really is amazing. But,
yeah. And the fact is, Michael, that, because of work of you and people like you, the city remains livable to some degree. Without the work of advocates for the last 30 years or more, this city would be unlivable.
There's no question that if tenants were not organized and did not fight back, the situation would be a lot worse. There's no question about that. We have lost ground in the last 20 years. The laws have been weakened dramatically by, Republican governor in Albany and Republican legislators in Albany, and they've been very, diligent about doing that. But tenants are fighting back and are organizing, and the kinds of activities that the Interfaith Assembly on homelessness and housing is doing, is a very important part of that. Tell us about the ceremony that you're going to have on June 1st. I understand you're going to be honoring a couple of people.
We will. The service will start at 7 o'clock at Grace Church, which is Broadway and 10th Street, go to 8 o'clock, and then we start the march at 8 and go down to City Hall, get there at 9. And we'll have some prayers and some songs. Actually, we're honoring two individuals, two clergy members who have coincidentally been on our board, and each of them have stayed overnight in City Hall Park on a number of occasions, actually. One that we're honoring is a man by the name of Chick Strutt, who is a Methodist minister who, though he's 75 and retired, I know just last year when I was sitting down to lunch with him and I found out he was on 12 different boards. The man, he's the guy behind the scenes, all these wonderful things that happen. When 9/11 happened, he was on the board of this interfaith committee to provide emergency aid to different groups who were assisting the victims and families of those victims. Chick is an unbelievable man, and we're honoring him as a Builder of the Blessed City Lifetime Achievement Award. Every year we identify an individual who we call a Builder of the Blessed City, and this year Chick is receiving a Lifetime, which is the first time we're giving any Lifetime Achievement Award, but Chick really deserves it. The man is just amazing. And the other man we're honoring is Father Mark Greenberg, who has also been on our board, who is the hardest working clergyman in housing that I've ever known.
I think you can safely say that. He is amazing, and he certainly deserves any award he gets. Absolutely. And he's very modest about all of this. I mean,
he is. He's been on our board. He's been our secretary. He's been the chair of our policy committee. He's also
on the Habitat for Humanity board.
He was the chair of the Habitat for Humanity board. He was one of the leaders in Bread for the World. He many things that he doesn't even talk about unless you press him on it. But yeah, Mark is an amazing man, and we're looking forward to honoring both Chick and Mark. And then they'll be marching with us. Actually, I think Chick probably won't be marching with us, but Mark will be marching with us, and Mark will probably be staying overnight with us.
Overnight in the park.
Yeah, and as I said, we're joined by folks from the R3 Real Rent Reform Campaign who will be starting at Grace Church, marching down to City Hall, and we're having that tent city, or it'll be a cardboard city, probably cardboard box city in City Hall, and then we'll hope to be moving up, going north towards Albany. We're waiting to get confirmation from a church in Washington Heights, and then
we're thinking of putting the tent city in Albany near the governor's mansion.
And we're considering whether, because we know that the governor, when the budget was being finalized, was saying he was committed to including rent regulations in the budget. It turned out not to happen. He said he couldn't do it.
I don't think he tried.
Right, and now we know that he's having this whistle-stop tour of the state, and he seems to have dropped rent regulations from his list of issues that he's committed to, and we're very concerned about that. So we're thinking about whether it's appropriate to call these 10 cities Cuomoville. We haven't yet made the decision. It depends really on whether the governor gives us an indication that he's still committed to renewing and strengthening rent laws, and we'll have to see if we want to tag these 10 cities with his name.
Yeah, and the ball is in his court. I mean, we're waiting to see what he's going to do.